Final Destination Bloodlines was directed by Lipovsky and Adam Stein and is the 6th film in the Final Destination franchise and the first film we've had in that franchise for 14 years. The last one was released, I believe, in 2010. I think, just quick background, I do really love the Final Destination franchise. It's been a kind of key part of my kind of horror fandom for the last 25 years. I think the first film came out in 2001. I would have just finished school. So it's, for my whole adult life, it's been a kind of beloved franchise. And it's one of those films that I know it's not kind of high art in terms of, it's not kind of elevated horror, but every one of the films in the series has always been really entertaining. I can kind of even get on board with the 4th film, The Final Destination. It's a franchise that I've always really enjoyed watching once in the cinema, because seeing those films in the cinema is just incomparable. You just have to see it fresh with a group of other people to get the real joy out of it. And then there's a kind of aspect of watching that again with people who haven't seen it, to see their reactions to some of the kind of insane deaths. And I'll be doing a bit of a watch along with some friends later on. My friend Yaz has never seen any of the Final Destination movies, so I can't wait to let her check those out with us later on. So with that in mind, let's just get to it. I did enjoy Bloodlines. I think it's a good and worthy addition to the series. You can probably sense a little bit of a hesitation in my voice because I do have some sort of criticisms and reservations. I think what's really interesting is if you look at the reviews critically for this film compared to the other 4, this one is vastly inflated to, I think the first film got something like 40% on Rotten Tomatoes, and this one's getting like in the 90s. I don't think that's particularly fair. And I think what's probably happened is over time, critics have realized that actually this is a really good franchise. And there was probably like less love for it in those kind of intervening years when it was new. But actually looking back, I mean, the first one was fiercely original. I remember seeing that and the content of that really blowing me away. So no, do I think that Bloodlines is double as good as all the other films? Absolutely not. But in the interest of, hey, look, I enjoyed this film, it was fun, I would watch it again, I thought it was a good addition, let's talk about the positives. So let's start with that. I thought the premonition scene in this film was potentially one of the best, maybe the second or third. So without giving away too many spoilers, this involves a collapse of a building, which we haven't had before. It's this sort of like Space Needle restaurant with a revolving roof that collapses. And the way that plays out, it's really long. It's got a number of different elements to it. So it isn't just one thing. There are a number of different things happen. And the way that then that's kind of shown as a premonition is actually quite different from the other movies. And most importantly, it takes place in 1968. It doesn't take place in the present day. And you'll see if you've seen the film, and I won't spoil it, why that's slightly different to how it normally plays out in these movies. So that was really good. I thought really well shot. Really did a good job of that really good ominous feeling that I think the Final Destination movies can do. That's that sense of dread that they build up around really everyday things. And there's something about heights in this movie, seeing something so haunting about this building in some ways, because obviously you know what's coming. And as I said, the premonition has lots of different stages and elements, lots of different elements of horror. So it's almost like 4 or 5 happenings in one thing. So I personally found the premonition scene very, very satisfying. And again, what they did with that, so it wasn't just the usual main character experiencing it. It kind of played out in a slightly different way. Separately, I think this film, all the other movies, they take place with either a group of friends or it will be a group of strangers in some cases. It will broadly be quite sort of archetypal in terms of the characters that you see in those films. It doesn't really differ from film 1 to 5. It's like the cookie cutter kind of main character. There is the kind of the jock character. There's the kind of the bitchy girl character. Like you kind of get those in every single film with slightly varying shades of grey. I actually felt more invested in this group, I think purely because it's about a family. That's the whole Bloodlines element of the film. The fact that you see this family unit, they're actually quite likable, I thought. And I thought they really did quite a nice job of showing them and showing the love between them, to the point where actually I really started to care about these characters. You kind of know they're going to die and you sort of want them to, because that's the sort of the fun of the movie, is the how and the what. But I definitely felt kind of an attachment to those characters. So Guy Busick is the writer of the film, and he wrote Abigail, he wrote Scream 6, not my favourite films. I think I've said before when I reviewed Abigail that there's a sort of a kind of quippiness with him. It's kind of I don't know. It's just a sort of, it grinds on me a little bit, the sense of humour, and I didn't find that with this. I thought they did a really good job of making it funny, but not making it a sort of silly comedy, which some of these horror films, they kind of go too far with it. And yeah, I thought some of the characters had some really fun one-liners. It never felt unrealistic. You know, it wasn't that the characters had just been through a horrific thing and then, you know, they try and kind of diffuse the tension with a silly joke. So with that in mind, I think there were sort of flaws in it. And I think, if I'm being really honest, I still don't see this replacing the first 3 films in the franchise in my kind of ranking. Number 2, I think, is my favourite. Number 1 is probably following up to that. And number 3, I just think that kind of trifecta of films was kind of perfect. I think 5 is fun, it's solid, it has a really interesting and kind of satisfying wrap up to the whole franchise. And 4, it's fun in some ways, but it's not a good film. It would always come last. And I think Bloodlines would kind of vie for positions for me for number 5. I think the main obvious criticism, which I think people would have seen, is this film has a really weak third act, like a really weak third act. It's actually pretty good, I would say, for the first 2/3. There are a couple of kind of major set pieces. There are a couple of incidents that get us to the point where we sort of find ourselves at a hospital. Once the characters leave that hospital, it felt like the scriptwriters had just got bored. And I think if you look at the trailer, there are definitely character moments that you don't see in the final film. There's a death involving a revolving door, which must have been what was there before, I assume, test audiences came in and said, we don't like that, we didn't find it satisfying. And what they changed it to, I just thought was very, very one note. It was very rushed. And just not all that logical, if I'm honest. I mean, there's this whole conceit about the grandma of the house is kind of holed up in this fortress to keep herself safe. But this fortress looks so dangerous. And, you know, there's spikes everywhere and there's things that can fall. It doesn't really make sense. It looks great on film, but it doesn't make any logical sense that a character would think that's where they're going to go. And I just think that last act, it borrows from Final Destination 2 massively. It really, really rushes everything. And I think even the kind of, Final Destination always has like an ending and then a kind of a fake out ending the last 5 minutes. And if I think about all the films, except maybe number 5, this one's fake out was very kind of throwaway. It kind of, you know, again, I don't want to give spoilers away, but I felt that it kind of didn't do much service to the characters that we've watched, you know, an hour seeing. And then I think critically was the death scenes. And obviously the death scenes in these films kind of are what make the films iconic. So you can't talk about Final Destination 3 without the tanning bed death. Final Destination 2, I mean, so many in that film. There's the pigeon's death and the bisection by fence. Number 1 has the bus crash. I don't know that there were any deaths in this that I would say were truly iconic. And I think, you know, a lot of people called this out, that a lot of them are just very CGI heavy. There's not a lot practically done. And I think it's a bit of a shame because I think back now and yeah, I just can't think of many. I think there is that one sequence which, if you've seen the trailer, I mean, you know exactly how it plays out. And again, that's really well done in terms of the build up and the tension. I mean, that trailer is like apparently the second most viewed trailer ever. And it's brilliantly done. But the actual payoff of that scene, which you don't really see when you see most of it, is not that great. And I think actually beyond that point, the fact that you then don't want the characters to die as well, I just found that less impactful. And it, you know, they really got less imaginative as they went on. That third act, there's a character that dies. I don't think you can even really see what happens to them because it's so dark. And bear in mind, I think that's the character you see in the other trailer would have been a much more interesting death. So I think that's a real shame. And I don't know whether I look at it again, whether it's outbalanced by some of the other sequences, the premonition, I don't know, but that I just didn't find there's one really like a death that's been talked about a lot, which I don't know, I didn't really think it played out as well. Again, it was played out in the dark, and actually it could have been played out with lights on. It would have been a bit more kind of visceral, a bit more graphic. So in addition to all this, I think as a film that's returning after 14 years, it probably would have been nice to have had like some additional lore to kind of understand what's happening. I do like the whole sort of family tree thing, which I think it introduces. And yeah, I think it you know, the family element definitely brings a lot to it. But I think it just had a few things that will hold it back. I've got to say, I'm not a huge fan of Tony Todd's appearances in the first film and actually the subsequent follow-ups. I always found his character to be quite superfluous to the films themselves. Like, what was he really doing there? What was the point of the character? I think it's just a really sweet send-off in this. Obviously, this was Tony Todd's last film, and I think it's obvious that when he did his scene, they kind of knew he was in his last few weeks and months. And I think he was allowed to deliver dialogue that was more about communicating to the fans of the franchise than the characters in the movie. And that's a really sweet moment, like to see a horror icon kind of have his, final goodbye on screen in a movie that, a franchise that he's famous for. I thought that was really special. And, when does that happen? So great. Again, not a massive fan of the Bloodworth character, but I thought actually they did a really good job of ingratiating him into the kind of the background of the story. So all in all, look, Bloodlines is really fun. I think it will be one of those movies that I will absolutely watch many, many more times, because these films are just pure entertainment. You can't not have fun with a Final Destination movie. But when I think about some of the really good films I've seen this year, it's more of a spectacle than something that you're going to really engage critically with. And that's fine, because that's not what these kinds of films are. So with that in mind, it's a 7 out of 10. I would say probably 4th or 5th favourite in my franchise. Again, not going to crack into those top 3 for me. But definitely go check it out and definitely go see it at the cinema. Anyway, thanks for that. We got a ton of stuff coming up in the next few weeks. So when I get my arse around to reviewing some of those films, I will see you on the next one.